Two brothers, same mother, same streets, same South Central Los Angeles. One of them became one of the most recognized voices in the world. The other never made it out. And the distance between those two lives, the guilt, the grief, the silence, is buried inside every record Barry White ever made. This is the story he almost never told, the name he almost never said out loud. His brother's name was Darryl, and without Darryl, without what happened to him and what it cost Barry to survive him, none of the music exists the way it exists. Not the voice, not the weight, not the particular quality of intimacy that made 100 million people feel in the dark that someone finally understood them. To understand what Barry White was really making, you have to start here, with two boys. Same house, same mother, same impossible set of choices, and the road that only one of them came back from. Sadie White raised her sons in South Central Los Angeles in the years after the Second World War, in a neighborhood that asked more of its residents than most neighborhoods ask, and gave back less. Their father was not present. He left the way fathers sometimes leave in places where the weight of everything is distributed unevenly, gradually, then completely, until his absence was simply the permanent condition of the house. What remained was Sadie and the two boys and the streets outside. Barry was born in 1944. Darryl came after. They grew up in the same bedroom, ate at the same table, walked the same route to school, along the same cracked sidewalks, under the same palm trees that lined the streets of South Central like a quiet joke about paradise. They were close in the way that brothers are close when there is nothing else, when the family is the only structure and the world outside it is indifferent to whether you thrive or disappear. But South Central in the 1950s was not a place that held still. It was a place in motion, always, and the motion it offered young men without fathers moved in one direction more reliably than any other. The streets had a logic. They offered what the legitimate world did not: belonging, structure, recognition, the particular security of being known by name in a place that would otherwise have no reason to know you existed. Barry understood that logic. He walked into it at 10 years old. Darryl understood it too. But Darryl walked into it differently. Darryl walked in all the way. There are two kinds of people who grow up in a world like South Central in the 1950s and 60s. There are the ones who are drawn to the streets and keep one foot on the threshold, who belong enough to be known but never fully surrender the idea that there is something else, somewhere else, waiting for them. And there are the ones who go all the way in, who stop looking at the threshold and start looking at the center, who find in the hierarchy and the loyalty and the rules of street life something that feels more real and more permanent than anything the outside world has offered them. Darryl was the second kind. He was magnetic. People who knew him describe a quality that the streets amplify and consume in equal measure. A fearlessness, a presence, the kind of energy that makes a room change when you walk into it. The kind of person that a neighborhood builds stories around. Barry watched his brother move through that world with something between admiration and dread. He knew what it meant to have that quality in South Central. He knew where it went. By the time Barry made his decision in the jail cell in 1960, the Elvis song, the reorientation, the direction chosen in 4 months of concrete and silence, Darryl was already deep in a life that did not offer the same exits. Barry walked out of Los Angeles County Jail in the summer of 1960 with a direction he had not had before. Darryl kept walking the road he was already on. The distance between them began to open. The years that followed were years of parallel lives running in opposite directions. Barry moved toward music with the particular intensity of someone who has chosen a direction and understands that the alternative is a road he has already seen the end of. He practiced. He failed. He joined groups that went nowhere. He worked. He borrowed money. He built something, slowly, in the dark, without any guarantee that it would hold. Darryl stayed in South Central, in the streets, in the world that had shaped them both and was now shaping Darryl completely. Barry watched from a distance that was partly geographic and partly something that has no clean name. The distance between someone who has found a way out and someone who has not, and the particular silence that lives in that gap between two people who started in the same place. He tried. There are accounts of conversations, of attempts to pull Darryl toward something else, of the specific frustration of watching someone you love make choices you cannot stop them from making. But the streets had Darryl in a way that conversations could not easily reach. And then one day, the day that Barry White carried in silence for most of the rest of his life, the news came. Darryl was gone. The streets had taken him the way the streets take people, suddenly, without ceremony, in the particular violence of a world that assigns very little value to the lives it consumes. Barry White was building his career when it happened. He was somewhere in the long years between the jail cell and the first hit, in the grinding middle distance of someone who has chosen a direction but has not yet arrived anywhere. He got the news, and he went quiet about it for a very long time. In the years that followed, Barry White gave thousands of interviews. He was, by the mid-1970s, one of the most recognizable voices in the world. He talked about South Central. He talked about the gang years. He talked about the jail cell and the Elvis song and the borrowed money and the long road to the first record. He was, in his way, a remarkably open man, willing to discuss the darkness he came from in a way that many people in his position were not. But there was one name he almost never said: Darryl. In interview after interview, across decades of public conversation, the name of his brother appeared rarely and briefly. A mention, a deflection, a subject changed with the practiced ease of someone who has long since decided that some things are not for public consumption. The people around him understood. You did not ask Barry White about Darryl. Then in 1994, a journalist asked. What happened next was not a breakdown. It was not a dramatic revelation. It was something quieter and more durable than either of those things. Barry White paused. For a long time. The kind of pause that tells everyone in the room that what comes next will be different from what came before. And then he spoke about his brother. Not in detail. Not with the full architecture of everything he had been carrying for 30 years. But he said enough. He said that losing Darryl had never left him. That the distance between his life and his brother's life was not something he had made peace with, not fully, not in the way people expect you to make peace with things when enough time has passed. He said that he thought about Darryl when he was making music. He said that some of what he was trying to do, in the music, in the voice, in the particular quality of warmth and weight that people heard and could not fully explain, was for Darryl. For the people who did not get out, for the lives that the streets consumed without anyone outside those streets stopping to mourn them properly. He said it quietly, and then he moved on. But the people who heard it did not forget it. There is a thing that happens when you understand what Barry White was carrying. You hear the music differently. Not differently in a technical sense. The arrangements are the same, the voice is the same, the production is the same. But the weight of it lands differently when you know where it came from. When you know that the man behind the voice grew up in the same house as a brother who did not survive, that the intimacy in the music, the particular quality that made 100 million people feel seen, feel held, feel less alone in the dark, was built on something that cost him everything to understand. Barry White became famous for making people feel loved. What he was actually doing, if you trace it all the way back, was something more specific than that. He was making music for the people who had been through something, for the couples who had survived difficult years and were still in the same room, for the people who knew what it meant to lose someone to a world that did not stop moving when they disappeared, for the person sitting in the dark who needed to feel, just for the length of a song, that their private grief and their private joy were not invisible to the universe. He knew what it was to survive someone you loved. He knew the particular silence of a life that went on when another life stopped. And he spent 40 years turning that knowledge into something that other people could hold. 100 million records. Sold out arenas in London, in Paris, in cities that had no language for where he came from. A voice that became the backdrop for the most private moments of millions of lives. All of it carrying Darryl, quietly, without ceremony. The way you carry someone you could not save. He never made peace with the distance between his life and his brother's. But he made music from it. Music that reached into the dark where people were alone with their losses and their loves and their private inventories of everything they had not been able to say out loud. That is what Barry White was building. From the jail cell to the concert hall to the studio where he worked until there was nothing left to give. Not a career, not a catalog, a place for people to put the things they could not put anywhere else. His brother's name was Darryl, and now you know why the music sounds the way it does. If this story stayed with you, if there is someone in your own life whose absence has never fully left you, tell me in the comments. I read everyone. And if you want more stories like this, the ones underneath the music, the ones that explain everything, subscribe. There are more to tell.